Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 89 of Muscle Asylum Radio. And this will be our seventh installment of our YouTube channel, Muscle Asylum TV. We are lucky enough to be joined by my regular co-host, Mick the Gift Galley, and all the way from somewhere in America, I'm not exactly sure where, Georgia in America, Matt Jansen. How are you, buddy?
Good. How are you? Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We did have a little bit of a chat before we started recording, and you did say that you have watched a couple of episodes of our show. Which ones have you watched? Obviously, the one with Big Josh.
Yeah, I watched the one with Josh. I just was watching yesterday and today the one with Luke, and then the one with Lee Priest are the ones that I've watched so far. So
yeah,
nice. Yeah.
They're a popular.
I must say, Matt, we're in the middle of a heat wave over here. It's unbelievable. Obviously, It's pretty cold where you're at.
Yeah, it's like we're waking up around 30 degrees right now, and then it's like maybe mid 50s. But I've heard from Josh how hot it's been for you guys. He said it's been crazy over there.
Well, where I live personally is the hottest place on Earth, and that's not exaggerating. That's not exaggerating, Gally. It's the hottest place on Earth. We've got another 45-degree day tomorrow and on Saturday, and that's Celsius, not Fahrenheit. So
and I think that I heard yesterday it was like 113 in degrees.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's insane.
It's pretty.
That's crazy.
It's not good.
Is it too or no?
Say that again?
Is it humid or not really?
Oh yeah, it's humid. There are other parts of Australia that are a lot more humid. Like if you go up north to Townsville and that's like 98 to 100% humidity. But it's pretty stifling out this way. But I'm enjoying it.
I don't know if you've heard. I'm up in the Gold Coast, Matt. So it's pretty humid up this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's muggy.
Yeah. Let's kick things.
That's how it is in Florida too. It's crazy humid in Florida. Like where Aaron's at, it's so hot down there, hot and humid.
Yeah, it's more humid, I heard, over there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Hey Matt, I actually relocate to Dallas in March for a job I've got. I hear the weather in Dallas can get pretty damn hot in the summer.
Yeah, well, but it's a little bit drier heat there, so it's not as bad. I don't think when we go to Vegas, for the Olympia and stuff, I don't think that heat is nearly as bad as what it is over here on the East Coast, in my opinion.
Yeah, nice.
How far are you going to be away from the beach in Dallas?
That's the only disappointing fact about going over
here. Yeah, you're a beach right now.
I've pretty much lived on the beach my whole life, kind of thing, and there's a big lake, Gretsch, that's about it. There's no beach.
Have fun swimming in the lake.
Texas is huge.
Yeah.
It takes like 16 hours to drive through Texas.
Holy shit! No, you're gonna have fun there. Yeah. I'll visit. I'll meet you at the Orleans in Vegas. Yeah. All right. Let's get stuck into it, Matt. I'm gonna ask you probably a question that you've been asked a million times before, and that's tell us a little bit about the Matt Jansen story. How you got into bodybuilding and how you eventually transitioned into being one of the most successful and biggest coaches on the planet.
Yeah, I've always been interested in muscle and gaining muscle. When starting out early on, I would say my dad had a very influential role. We grew up. I love watching Rocky movies with him. And early on, I was drawn to just the transformation that Rocky did. In his movies from Rocky 1 to Rocky 4. That really just it was attractive to me to figure out how that happened or, what he did in his training. And I love the training montages in those movies. So that was kind of the start. I started training with my dad in 7th grade. And then shortly thereafter, one of my best friends in middle school, I would say he was well beyond his years in training at that time. So he kind of took me under his wing. We did the Leo Costa Titan method. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
No.
It's a 4-day a week. It's a very, very it's probably one of the hardest training programs out there in terms of written programming. And I was way over my head. But I learned a lot from that. I basically failed every workout that I did. But I was trying to keep up with him. So that was kind of a fun start for me. But the reason why I bring that up is there's a lot of foundational truths within that plan. Scott Stevenson has adapted that plan into his own training. So things like muscle rounds and stuff like that is what that plan is based around. So it was a very good start for me. Initially in high school, I really wanted to make it to college soccer. That was my goal. So I was bodybuilding as best as I could with still keeping soccer at the forefront of my training. And I ended up playing college and soccer. I got injured the second half of my freshman year. I ended up getting several concussions. So before I stopped playing soccer, I had to basically make up the time that I was missing on the field in the gym. And that's really when I started to learn to fall in love with the gym from a bodybuilding standpoint. I was going to school for exercise science, and, just kind of took off from there. I stopped playing soccer. And from a coaching aspect, I had one of the first coaches that I had, his name was Jason Theobald here in the U.S. He was very, very instrumental in my development as a coach. I learned a ton from him. We tried several different things with my body alone. And so I was able to learn a lot of information. So just locally in my area, I started helping out a few people, and I was very blessed with the people that I helped. I currently now my first 3 clients that I ever worked with, one is an IFPA pro, which is a natural pro, and the other 2 are IFBB pros. So I helped turn 2 of those people pro. That's my son. Sorry.
That's all right.
I helped turn 2 of those people pro, and then the other one he went pro on his own. But so like my initial clientele base was about as successful as they could be. Genetics there were very high. So what I did with them worked well. So I'm very blessed with the start that I had. Because I think that propelled myself to have maybe success at an earlier age than what most are able to have, simply because the crop of clients that I got in initially was very good. And then it just kind of took off from there. So that's kind of the start. As far as like really breaking into the IFBB, I have to give Justin Compton a lot of credit for that. Justin and I, after I got married, I moved from Georgia to Kentucky. My wife had a job up there. And I saw on the muscular development forums, Justin had commented, it was like talking about the most hardcore gyms in America. And one of them happened to be about 15 minutes away from where I moved in Lexington. So I messaged Justin and I said, hey, man, I know I can't hang with you weight-wise. I said, but I'd love to get the opportunity to train with you. Would you be willing? And he's like, yeah, man, absolutely. He said, actually, I'm training legs tomorrow. Show up. So he was at that point, he was 6 weeks out of Chicago. Which is his pro debut. We trained together, and that was kind of the start of our friendship and our relationship. And, after we got done training, he said something that was pretty meaningful to me. He said that he really appreciated the fact that I was able to push him in the gym, and he also appreciated the fact that I wasn't coming to get anything from him, whether that be knowledge or drug knowledge, or I didn't ask him any questions. We chit-chatted in between sets, but he's like, I felt like that was the first time I trained with somebody that wasn't trying to just get something from me other than just training alone.
That would have been hard to do. That would have been hard to do, to actually sit back and train and keep your mouth shut in all due respect, by keeping your mouth shut and not asking questions and being a pest. Like, it would have been hard, especially if you're a little bit starstruck at the same time.
Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to earn his respect through how I trained.
Yeah.
And I figured if that's where the road eventually leads, there's going to be a time and place for that. But I don't like talking about that kind of stuff in the gym anyway.
Yeah.
So it just worked out very well. And that's kind of how I got my start. Justin was the one that connected me with Dallas, and then from there it's kind of we're to where we're at now.
How far back was that, Matt?
I started training with Justin, I think his pro debut was in 2013. 2013, yeah, because 2013 he did Chicago. 2014 he did the Orlando Pro, and then 2015 he did the Arnold, and then so on from there.
Do you think that's helped you out more coming along as a coach as well? Because obviously, you look the part. You train extremely hard as well. You compete. A lot of prep coaches we've seen over there. It doesn't really matter if you've got the knowledge. It doesn't matter. But do you think it's helped you more where you look the part as well?
Well, yeah. Honestly, I've had a lot of the guys tell me that. Like, that's why Nathan works with me. That's why Charles was attracted to me initially. Charles and I, we had our first interaction last year at the Miami Nationals, the national show that's held in Miami. And we were training in the gym together, and he was on one side of the gym training chest. I was on the other side of the gym training legs. And about halfway through a workout, he said, hey, man, he said, we need to talk, and that's kind of how our relationship started. But I think, a lot of a greater percentage of the top coaches aren't training anymore. And that, I got to give, I spent a lot of time, Neil Hill mentored me a lot, and I've always wanted to replicate what him and Flex had, a tremendous amount of respect for them. And even though Neil is getting older, he's still in the gym with the guys. And, and that's what I've always wanted to be about. Even though I'm not a professional myself, I want to find ways through effort and intensity and, the energy that I bring to the gym to push these guys in the gym. And, and to me, that's what it's all about. And it's just about having fun too, so.
Actually, touching on that, is that still something you want to look at yourself, is going pro?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I definitely want to go pro. But for me, it's more so about having a pro physique, that's what I really care about, so I'm big into taking long off seasons and making a lot of progress. And my wife is pregnant again, so I don't know when I'm going to compete. I initially planned to compete in July of this year at USA's. I did USA's last year and got third. That was my plan, but the baby's due in July, so I might compete at nationals at the end of the year. I might not, but in the meantime, I'm just training as hard as I can. But yeah, I definitely my goal as a bodybuilder myself, I would love to turn pro and place top 5 in a pro show, and that's kind of where I'm at right now in terms of that.
Is turning pro important to you from a business perspective also? Do you think you turning pro is only going to enhance your status as a coach in the industry?
For myself personally, yes. I don't think any of the people that I've worked with, it's like a non-issue. I've gained their respect through my knowledge and other factors, but like, I just want to put a concrete stamp on, on my knowledge and the fact that I came from a very, very small frame, and it's taken me a lot of time, but I love it, and I think if I can just add that to my name and my credentials, I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah. You've spoken about a few of the top names that you've prepped over the years. Can you list some of the names of the top pros that you have worked with in the past and talk a little bit about them? Who was the funnest to work with? Who was the most difficult?
Yeah. So I did work with Justin Compton for a little bit. Obviously I worked with Dallas McCarver, and we had a very, very close relationship. We spent a lot of time together. And then more recently, in the Open, I've worked with in the past 2 years, I've worked with Ian, and then this year, Charles and Nathan. And then I have Sean Clarita in the 212, and I have a lot of other guys coming up the ranks. Derek Ostland's one of the ones in the 212. He finished second at 2 shows last year. There's a lot of guys that I'm excited about. But in terms of the bigger names that I've worked with, I'll start with Justin. Justin is about as textbook as it gets with bodybuilding. Not difficult at all to work with. I don't think it frustrates me that we didn't bring his best, or what myself and him believed was his best. He had a lot of hiccups and challenges in 2016 when we prepped together. But we even still talk about it now. We're still good friends, and it was like probably maybe 8 months ago now. He sent me a text, something to the effect of, I was just looking over the peak that we did for the Arnold, and we had a little bit of a disagreement on, the water cutting aspect of it. And he said, if I would have just stuck with your plan from the start that we had together, he said that probably would have been just fine. So like, obviously it's not like something that I dwell on, but it does bother me when I don't bring an athlete's best. Even with Josh, like the dynamic of me working with Josh was kind of all over the place. It was more so just him and I, holding hands, wrapping arms around each other, just trying to get him to the finish line type thing. But even with him, like we had the challenge of Dallas passing away and how mentally tough that was on him. And basically he just wasn't mentally locked in on that show. But yet we both kind of agreed together that we wanted to do it for Dallas. And Josh and I, we handled it in 2 separate ways. Josh was very thoughtful and emotional, and I was like trying to shut all that off, just trying to get to the end goal kind of thing. I still was emotional, but like I also knew how Dallas was and what Dallas would have wanted me to do, and I tried my best to operate in that way. But like with Josh, even, we got to the Olympia on Sunday. By Monday night, we had went to bed, and my wife called me. She went into labor. So I flew out the first plane the next morning to try to get back for the baby being born. And, I feel like we reached a really, really good spot by Thursday night, and then it kind of just fell apart from there. And it bugs me that I wasn't there to be closer in touch with him, to kind of figure it out. And Josh was also in a place where, like, his head was all over the place, so he didn't even really I'm not going to say he didn't care, but, like, as things were starting to change, it wasn't like our communication was as good as what it could have been if Josh's head was, like, really locked in. Mm-hmm. Just because he just had so many things that rightfully so bothered him, about how Dallas's death and how that was handled at the Olympia that year. So there was a lot going on. But Josh, I would love to work with Josh again, and I know Josh feels a certain way about Chad, and I respect that. But, like, for me, it's like if I commit to somebody and I don't bring their best, but I know that there's variables that weren't 100% that we can fix. I would love the opportunity to fix those variables. But in terms of, like, the most challenging, Dallas was for sure the most challenging athlete that I worked with in terms of his body. I think the amount of tissue that he added, it was like no two preps were the same. But we were constantly changing things to constantly try to get his body to react the way that we wanted to. And what I mean by that is, like, Dallas was somebody that when he was full, he looked awesome. And the longer he went flat, the more his body just really, really faded to the point where, like, nothing was popping on him. Progress pictures looked awful. So it was like a fine line. Like, if you rode him too flat for too long, it didn't yield a dividend that where most guys, if you just run them flat, they're gonna be okay once they get food. And he wasn't that way. So it was like, for lack of a better word, like a carb cycle approach where we were going high for 2 days and low for maybe 3 days, and then maybe a half high day, and then, like, but that's why, like, we lived together, and I was able to fine tune those variables because it was like half the day he would look good and then his body would just fade. And I think a lot of that had to do is he didn't really have the muscle maturity yet due to how quickly it was coming onto his frame. I think our best prep together, and I can be as transparent as you guys want me to be, but it's hard for me as a coach because I get emotionally attached to these guys. So, like, I think our best prep together was our first Olympia. That was in my opinion, that was his best look in terms of conditioning and fullness. In 2015, and we lived together for 8 weeks straight to finish out that prep. But I walked a really fine line of just, like, really kind of being more of like a dictator because that's what I felt like at that point he needed. Because we had so much on the line. Like, he had just left Tawny. This was his Olympia debut. This was my first Olympian. Like, I couldn't fail. So I was really hard on him. There was days that we would go and train together and we wouldn't talk the rest of the day, but it worked. And then as that kind of relationship grew, after the Olympia that year, he was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I had an opportunity to move down to Tennessee, so I moved down to Tennessee so we could be closer together. We got really, really close. We were training together 3 to 4 times a week. And then, I made some calls like in the Chicago prep and the Olympia prep that year, more based off of where I thought Dallas was emotionally, rather than where his body needed to be. Like if you're living together and you see somebody struggling and you care about that person, it's harder to make those judgment calls that are just like black and white. So that those are some of the mistakes that I made. Like, I think sometimes I fed him too much simply because of, I knew how hard he was pushing and how bad he felt. So that was kind of Dallas in a nutshell. When we got back together, he worked with Chad for the Arnold Australia and the Arnold in Columbus. It was crazy. Like, that was the happiest Dallas ever was during that period of time, that we got back together, and, we grew really, really close. I was really, really excited. Like, that was like, I felt like his body was really starting to take its own. It was more predictable. Even through the off season, like, he just held a better look. And then obviously we know what happened there, but I would say for sure he's been the most challenging in terms of, like, actual making changes, making sure he's on the right track. It was almost like a daily to every 2-day thing with him where we had to make changes to keep him going in the right direction.
You mentioned you mentioned the amount of lean tissue Dallas was putting on in such a short amount of time and such a quickly.
Yeah.
I think someone mentioned that. I can't remember what podcast it was. One of our episodes only a couple of weeks ago, maybe even this week, saying that was basically due to the way he trained and he changed his training methods. Is that correct? Or was it? Yeah. What changes did he make?
Well, he was so just as like a quantifiable point, he won the Cal Pro in 2015, which was May 23rd, at 252 pounds. And then we left for prejudging at the Olympia in September of that same year. So from May to September at 269 pounds.
Yeah.
So that was the change that he made there. But I really believe in just hard, heavy training, and that's what he did. Basically working up to one top end set, everything you have, possibly turning it to a drop set, or doing rest pause and then moving on. And that was the biggest change. Like we tried to keep a dumbbell or a barbell in our hand as much as possible, or on our back, whatever we were doing. And that's how we trained all the way through until like the last 3 weeks when I just didn't want him to get injured. But that was the basis of what our training was. And up to that point, his training for a while was more machine based, and it was a huge change that we made.
Yeah, with your coaching, you obviously don't just focus on nutrition alone. You obviously work a lot with your clients on training also.
Yeah. I have them, within their check-ins, I have them send me videos every week, so I can critique. Because I'd love to be in the gym with more people than I am. It's just not realistic. But I think that's such a huge component to what we do in bodybuilding that's often missed, or not even touched on. So if I can help them with better execution or actually realize what a true set to failure is or whatever, how to make the reps really count, then I'll do that as best as I can.
So those videos, you said that your clients send you videos on a regular basis of them actually training. Is that to Is that to basically for you to critique form, to critique technique, or is it more so to just to basically let them know, look, you're training like a pussy, you have more in you?
Well, it's all the above. To me, I think regardless of training method, effort and execution are the first things that I want to look at. And then on top of that, it's just making sure that once their effort and their execution is where it needs to be, their form's proper, that they're taking the set as far as they can take it. And what I tell them is, I need you to send me videos of exactly what you're doing. Like, don't try to impress me. Don't go harder just because you're on camera. Like, send me true working sets of what you do every day, and then we'll go from there and we'll adjust from there. And that's a big part of what I do. Because I think it makes such a difference. And I love the training part of it. I love being in the gym. And to me, that's what bodybuilding is all about.
How do you let a client know that they're not training hard enough? If they're sending you videos and they're telling you, look, I promise you this is as hard as I can push and this is as heavy as I can lift, then to you it's obvious that they can actually push further. How do you instill that into their brain? It's a mindset.
Front with them. If you question the video based off of factually what's there, if they just stop short of anywhere close to being close to failure, I'll just say, you couldn't have done any more there. And they're like, well, I guess after watching it back, I could have, and honestly, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Michaela Aycock, but she's like the poster girl for me. She trains so hard, and she puts everything that she has into her sets, and that's the standard that I expect. As long as there's not an injury or, I don't want people getting injured. But if your form is proper and you're not having breakdown in your form, the risk of injury isn't nearly as great. So I want to make sure the form is right first, and then after the form is in place, then let's get the effort to where it needs to be.
Yeah. Gally,
Matt, what sort of judging criteria do you have? Because I'm sure you've got a lot of amateurs that contact you about coaching. Is there a certain thing you look at, or do you feel them out for a few weeks and see what they're like, or how would someone go about sort of, contacting you for that sort of thing?
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of just the nature of the business. I'm not very critical on who I take. At one point I tried to go in that direction more so, but I find that I'm cutting myself short as a coach. Sometimes it's like, it seems like no matter what I do, I maintain the same amount of clients. Clients come and go. Some people just stay with me for a prep, some don't. So I always hold around 70 clients through the year. And the thing is at the end of the day, it's a service-based industry. Like I would love for I think this is where Batter, I think, has like a really cool thing going, is like Batter owns the gym, Batter owns the coaches, Batter hires who he wants to train out of his gym, and it's built like a football team in the U.S., or like a real sports club. I would love, I'm going somewhere with this and I'll come back around, but like I would love to be a coach, whereas like an NFL coach can actually be a coach and not worry about people's feelings all the time and just get into them when they need to get into them, because at the end of the day, it's because I care, but a lot of times I have to more so walk on eggshells, because it is a service-based industry. At the end of the day, if a client doesn't like what you're telling them, or if you're too hard on them, they'll just run the other direction, so that's something else I have to deal with. And sometimes I stick to my guns and the client does run, So in terms of who I work with, as long as you're willing to put in the work, and as long as you are willing to do what I ask and give your best effort, like I don't have like it's not like you have to be nationally qualified or you have to have done, a national show, or like I work with a lot of people. I even work with some moms still. I have a wide basis of people that I work with.
Mm. How do you feel about the current, like I know over here in Australia, it's pretty bad. We've got a lot of high profile, what would you call them, Gretchen, Instagram famous people and you've just said you got a client base of say 70 odd. These people are coaching 200, 300, 400 people. Where obviously you can't put the time and effort into that many guys, and you're just sending out the same templates over and over, which I think is kind of ruining this industry a bit. How is it over in the States?
There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of coaching that is like non-direct coaching, where they basically have a coaching staff working under them. So you might be working with somebody by name, but you're not really even working with them.
Yeah,
that's something I've been approached with that, and it's something I don't want to be a part of. Yeah, you can increase your bottom line, but like you're losing your integrity in the process. There is one coach. I don't know how many clients he has, but Chris Tuttle over here in the U.S., he does a tremendous job. He's very much on top of his athletes, and I think he's got a lot of athletes that he works with. So kudos to him. It can be done, but more often than not, it's just, for me and how I work, it's just not realistic to really carry more than that, because I'm going to lose the attention to detail. Something that I hate doing is like, if somebody updates me 1 week, I don't want to have to go back the next week and ask them a question that they already gave me an answer to the week previous, so I need to be, and as best as I can, like I need to remember everybody and remember where they're at in their program and, where their progress is at. And if they were sick 2 weeks ago, and, that's a lot to remember. So if you have too many people on your plate, it's just going to be like a conveyor belt type system. And there's no way that you can actually really put quality into that.
Yeah. How do you structure your preparations for athletes? Like, do you start off by putting those athletes in a slight calorie deficit and then increasing that deficit as they progress? Or are there other different methods like macronutrient timing or anything like that you incorporate into programs to bring an athlete into condition?
Yeah, I would say if I know the athlete's body well, and if we aren't like if somebody doesn't come to me just for prep and I've had an off season to work with them, my goal initially, once we start prep, is I want to get their body responding as fast as possible. So I might make a little bit of a bigger pull. Like, I'm not one of these guys that pulls like 30 grams of carbs at a time and then watches what happens, and pulls another 30 grams of carbs and watches what happens, and then next thing you know, 6 weeks have gone by and nothing's changed. So I want to pull to the point where they are making progress right off the bat. As far as like nutrient timing, yeah, I mean, like as best as I can. It depends on the environment that the athlete's in. Like during prep, especially when you're in a deficit and the deficit starts to get longer and you're doing cardio, I like having carbs for meal one. After cardio, I think that replenishes you some mentally and physically. And then the rest of their carb intake for the day is based off of their training time. So if they get to train after 3 meals, they might have carbs meals 1, 2, and 3. Train maybe carbs meal 4, and then the last 2 meals will be carbless. But if some people, like for example, like Sean Clarita, he chooses to train in the evening. That's when he likes to train. For him, I might pull carbs out of meals 2 and 3, put them back in pre-training meal 4, and then have carbs again post-workout after he trains in the evening. I'm not a guy that's like, you can't have carbs at night. I want to try to make the training window as effective as possible, from a satiety standpoint, from an energy standpoint, and then the rest of the day, if you're suffering, you're suffering. You got to do what you got to do. But for me, I like to keep performance within bodybuilding as best as you can, and structure everything around the training time and also the cardio time, because I think it's important that you're assertive during your cardio. So that, that's something that's important to me as well.
What about cardio in an off season? Are you a big believer in maintaining some sort of cardio training in an off season at all?
Yes, I do. And honestly, it's just for heart health. That's my biggest reason to keep it in. I do think it can help some with hunger levels in some athletes and digestion. But the biggest change that I've seen, especially in myself, is that in the past years I haven't done cardio, or I wasn't as consistent with it. But this year, after USA's, I've continued it all the way through. And as of now, I've lowered my hemoglobin by a total of 2 points, just from keeping cardio in, which that to me is a huge change. My hemoglobin usually runs a little bit high, and the last time I had it checked, they're like, "Yeah, you're good," and I hadn't even donated. I went to donate, and it was back in range. So I was really, really happy with that. So the heart benefit, and also the work capacity benefit. Like if you keep cardio in, you're not as winded during training. And that's why I like to keep it in. It's not necessarily for body composition or things like that, but more so the heart factors, the health factors, and also making sure you can train hard.
Yeah. What do you think of some coaches, and I know it's a lot over here, some coaches think that you don't need cardio whatsoever. And I know there's not one plan that fits all. But I mean, Gretchy's the same as we're guys that have brought up where cardio it's something that's a must in most people's programs.
I can't get lean unless I do fasted cardio. That's just, and it has to be fasted. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Yeah, like Gally was saying.
I would say very rare. I'm working with Roman Fritz right now, which is a good challenge for me, because he is unlike anybody else I've ever worked with in terms of the food that he can handle. He might not do cardio, but I would say that's probably the only athlete that I've ever had not do cardio. And now, granted, like if they're in shape and we can get them a little bit fuller and harder by pulling it at the end, I'm all for that. But let's make sure that you're in shape first. Even with myself, I was somebody that always did basically, I needed about 8 weeks, so 45 minutes in the morning, 45 minutes at night to get in the condition that I want to be in. This last prep, I tried to not do that. And, looking back, I should have still done it. I was doing more so like an hour in the morning, and then maybe 20 minutes after, but I should have just stuck to my 45 and 45. I think it just works better for me. So I'm a huge proponent of cardio. And also, too, I'd honestly rather do more cardio and eat more food than not do cardio and eat less food.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Yeah, and what type of cardio do you normally adopt during your, with your clients and with yourself? Is it more high-intensity cardio or steady state?
It's just steady state. For me, I want to elicit the best heart rate response that we can with the least amount of impact on your recovery. So honestly, I'm not even a huge fan of the stairs. I don't think the stairs take your legs away. I don't believe in that if you're training legs hard, but I do think it hinders your recovery. I love the bike. I like getting on a recumbent bike, but really, really working hard. But there's no eccentric loading on a recumbent bike, so it's not nearly as hard on your joints. Just get your heart rate up, pedal hard, make sure you're working on there. And that's what I advise my guys to do most of the time, and it works very well.
Yeah, I think the bike too, the biggest benefit of using a bike is the way it conditions your knees. I stopped using the bike about a month ago now, and doing squats now, my knees are killing me. But I didn't have that problem when I was using the bike every morning. Yeah. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? And do you think it's a beneficial practice that bodybuilding should be adopting at all? Is it something you use with your clients?
No, I don't. I don't think if you're trying to grow, if you're trying to maximize your physique, I don't think it's the best way to do it. Now, I do think that you need to do everything you can to make your digestion as best as possible. So if you want to not cram meals in the middle of the night and give yourself a little bit longer window to digest the food, I'm all for that. But I'm not a proponent of fasting for 16 hours and eating food for 8. I just don't think it's the best way to grow. And at the end of the day, for me, bodybuilding is about changing your physique and not just bringing the same thing over and over. And I think you're creating an environment that it's hard to do that in if you're only giving yourself 8 hours to eat. And then, protein, maximizing protein synthesis and all those things. Like, it's just, I don't think it's the best thing for bodybuilders to do that are aiming to be better bodybuilders.
I'm gonna give you a scenario. If a client approached you and we'll say around 100 kilo mark bodybuilder, and they came to you wanting to do a 16-week prep, or 16 or 20-week prep leading into a show, they gave you their current nutritional plan and it was subpar, maybe about 3,000 calories, a little bit less than that. Over the 16, 20-week period, would you increase calories as a starting point and then slowly decrease from there on, or would you maintain that 3,000 calorie point and work off that moving forward?
For sure. It's funny. I actually had 2 guys email me in the past 2 days that that's exactly what I'm going to do. If the condition is in a spot where I feel like they're either ahead or where they should be for 20 weeks out, 16 weeks out, and they're under eating, I'm for sure going to try to ramp their food up for at least 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm not going to throw them from 3,000 calories to 4,500 at one go, but I'll go 3,700 and see how they do for a week, and then go 4,200 and see how they're, doing there, and then kind of slowly work up, because that to me, I think one of the big things on this, in America is, I'm going to say this twofold, but there's a huge emphasis on blood glucose levels. And it's almost like a lot of coaches over here, it kind of boggles my mind. It's like they're dieting people based off of their blood sugar versus dieting them based off of what their metabolic intake or, their individual metabolism can handle. It's like an obsession with knowing what your blood sugar is at. Now, granted, I am not a proponent of running people's blood sugar crazy high, but at the end of the day, like, if we look back in time, I don't think Jay Cutler was checking his blood sugar before every meal before he was eating. It's gotten to the point of like obsession, like all these numbers, blood sugar. I do think keeping blood sugar in a healthy range is important, but at the same time, like, you got to push it to some extent. If you're so concerned with every little variable and overthinking everything, like, you're never going to grow. You're never going to respond. So, from your question, yeah, I would definitely try to get their food up. That to me is what the off season is all about. Trying to build as much metabolic efficiency as possible, getting your numbers up. That way, that for me, this past prep was the biggest change. Like, I was eating 950 grams of carbs in my off season, and yeah, it was a struggle. But like, the dieting for me, the first 12 weeks was a breeze. Yeah. Because I had so much to pull from without really even feeling it. Versus in previous years, I tried to stay leaner and ended up getting softer in the process anyway, and I wasn't eating nearly enough.
Yeah. What about infrared saunas? Do you implement them in the use of your clients' programs at all, or if so?
I don't.
No, you don't at all. No. See, like, we have that many fads here in Australia. Infrared saunas is one of them. One of the things people are talking a lot about now is the importance of sodium and potassium around training time. Do you make sure that you monitor the levels of sodium and potassium one of your clients is having around their training?
Sodium, I would say more so than potassium. Potassium, I just trust that they're getting what they need through their green vegetables. If they have some potato within their diet. I'm a big proponent of sodium, though. Especially all year long, but especially at a deficit. The nutrient transportability of sodium. When you're flat, like, you can be flat and still get a really good pump during training. So I basically have them pink or sea salt all their meals, and then I'll have them do about 1.5 to 2 grams in their pre-workout, which is typically like citrulline, creatine, and then the salt, just to make sure that the nutrient transport is there, especially if carbs are absent.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm very much similar, and I know a few of my clients will be watching this, so good.
Yeah. I'm thinking about adopting, and we do have a coach here in Australia. He's very, very unique. I will give him a plug, Coach Eugene Teo, and he's very big on the pomegranate and the pomegranate juice and the beetroot, right? And he does. So you know him, yeah, and he does. He does his his dark chocolate. He's all natural, yeah. But Yeah, no, I love your stuff, and and I might give that pomegranate and beetroot juice a crack.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, it definitely does. If you were going to add a percentage to compare the importance of training versus nutrition, what percentage would you give each? Like, you know how most people would say it's 60% training, 40% nutrition. What would you weigh it up? Because honestly, I know you're a big believer in your training.
As it is, I say, in my mind, you give 100% to both.
Yeah.
You're not gonna hold the condition that you need to hold if you're lacking on the nutrition. You're not gonna have the density and size that you need to have if you're lacking on the training. I would say that not everybody trains hard, so they rely more on the nutrition aspect. I think that's the truth of the matter. I think if something goes to the wayside, I do think it is the training. I would tend to believe that most people stick to their diet during a prep, for the most part, and the training is what gets weaker and weaker and softer by the week. But again, I mean, the density, the exercise selection, it shows. I know I cannot wait to see Josh on stage at the Arnold. I can't wait. Because I know he's busted his ass. I know and it's going to show. And the way that he trains, you can't train like that and just not have that look about you that you train hard. I mean, to me, it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
I think this will be the best Josh we've seen. Yeah. He's going hard.
Sure. So. Yeah. His arms have come up. Everything about him is very, very, it just looks different.
Yeah. Speaking of bodybuilding like that, then, Matt, who do you feel is the greatest bodybuilder of all time? And also, do you think our sport's progressing as we've gone on, or do you still think? I mean, everyone keeps bringing up the '90s era. That's obviously back when I started too. Those physiques, I saw a lot of them at the Olympia. So, do you actually think we're progressing? And who do you think's the greatest?
That's a good question. I want to believe that we are still progressing. I want to believe that we are still heading in the right direction, for the most part. I think the greatest to step on stage was Ronnie Coleman, beyond a shadow of a doubt. I think that the guy that's done the most for our sport is Jay Cutler, and Flex Lewis. I think those two guys have done the most for bodybuilding. But Ronnie, in my opinion, was the best. I don't know if we'll ever see another Ronnie again. But I do think overall, I think the sport is progressing. We could go on and on, but the picture quality, video quality, it was all different. I mean, even if you look at LeVrone never had the glutes that the guys at the Olympia now have. He never was fully in from the back. And that's number 2, number 3 in the world. If you don't have glutes, you might as well not even. You're not going to be top 5 if you don't have glutes right now. In the Olympia. This year Rami was a little bit off, and he got punished for it. If it was all just about size or, whatever, he would have been right there in the mix still, but he wasn't. So I do think overall we're progressing. I think in some ways, social media is hindering our sport. It's hindering and helping. I wouldn't be the coach that I am without social media. It's helped me tremendously. But at the same time, the guys that should be getting paid aren't getting paid because you have girls that'll do it for free for, some product. And that makes it tough. In that regard, I think we have regressed in terms of, the financial aspect of being a bodybuilder. Now, the money's still there. It's just not as easily attainable as what it once was. Actually, Chris Cormier actually posted a picture, I think, last night of one of the old Muscle Tech ads, and it had like him and Cutler and Johnny Jackson. Like, we won't ever see that again, you know, like where they have these super teams, which I thought was awesome. You know, but I do think the physiques are still improving. You know, there's a young crop of young guys coming up that are going to be very good. You know, and I'm excited to be a part of that.
Yeah. I was at the Olympia this year, and I thought when Sean and Phil walked out, I actually thought that Sean should win this. I didn't think they'd give it to him, but they did. Do you think you see Sean staying at the top of the Olympia, and do you actually see Phil coming back as well, or do you think Phil might actually hang it up?
I think Phil might be done.
It's so sad to hear. So many people say that. I actually get really upset hearing that. Just more so his work ethic and how much he's like proven himself to be an advocate for working so hard and pushing himself, but then just gives up the first time he actually loses. It just
I don't know. Something just tells me I think the way that he feels. I'm not saying he was treated wrongly, but I think he feels he was treated wrongly. I just think he might be done. And also too, I think let's be real. If you as a competitor, if you're looking at the images that everybody else can see, you got to be real with yourself, about the direction that you're going in. And that's for me as a coach. That's for anybody. But I think there's a point where if you can't match your absolute best, and you know that you can't, do you still continue? Especially for him as a 7-time champion. As far as this year with Roden, I don't know. I think as soon as Roden walked out last year, in my opinion, he was the winner. There's just the look of his skin, everything about him. He had winner just written all over him. And even if you watch like the replays, like Roden had this look of confidence on his face the whole entire time. And if even within Phil's smile, you could tell it was like,
he was worried.
Yeah.
He
like
was
he
worried.
was concerned. He was concerned.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that Rolly is going to make a hard push this year. And Rolly is a little bit of a outlier in the fact that he can be dead on or he can be big and full and a little bit watery, But I think if he nails it, I think he'll be in the mix. I don't know. I would like to think that Sean could win again. I personally for my guys, I would like for Sean to win because I think Nathan compares more to him. I think Charles isn't a mass monster yet. He's heading in that direction, but he's not there yet. So Charles is going to have a better comparison to him. Nathan's actually beaten Sean before. So in terms of Sean winning, I think it's good for a lot of the guys that are up and coming.
What about Josh? Do you think he's a future Mr. Olympia?
I told Josh, and when we were prepping for the Olympia, he could win the Olympia. I fully believe that Josh can win the Olympia. If Josh wants to win the Olympia, I think he can do it for sure. Josh has to just battle the things that he struggles with more than anything, which is the dieting aspect of it. But he can. His frame is massive. Josh, I'll say this. I've said this before, but Josh trains. He trained the hardest of any pro I've ever worked with leading up into a show. Yeah. Some of that might have been anger-induced or frustrated, whatever. I don't care. Like, he trained – we were 9 days out, and he squatted 585 for 10 and then did lunges with 315, or that's pounds, so whatever that is in kilos,
A lot. Enough.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I told Josh that I believe that he could win Olympia last year, So.
Yeah. If Phil came to you as a client now, Phil Heath, said he wanted to compete at this year's Olympia, and obviously his downfall this year was his stomach issue. You as a coach, how would you rectify that issue?
That's a good question. I would like to believe that I would stick to my guns, and I don't want to take on anybody that I don't truly believe that I can help at that level. I don't know if it's structurally due to his surgery or if it can be fixed. So I wouldn't make a commitment to him that if he came to me, which, in the ideal world, like, I wouldn't make a commitment to him that we were going back to the Olympia. I would make a commitment to him that I was going to do the best that I could to rectify the issue. TVA training. But honestly, he doesn't even come across to me as somebody who really pushes the food or, I don't know. Like, I don't know if he's somebody that loads on a ton of like fibrous carbs, maybe. If that were the case, that would be the first thing that I would change. I would change if he's somebody that uses, sweet potato, white potato, maybe some skin in the potato, oatmeal. I would change those variables first in terms of what can we realistically do to fix this. I would go that route if that was, if he said, I loaded on 400 grams of sweet potato every 2 hours. Well, then I would 100% change that. But I don't know, like, there's a few years they posted. I saw a picture of him the other day at the Chiru Classic. in like 2013, and I was like, that 2013 look, that's still the best bodybuilder on earth today.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't need to do anything from 2013. And I believe that. Like, that look is crazy. So I don't know if, I don't know if I have the tools necessary to help him, and that's just me being honest. Like, I don't know what the underlying issue there is, if it's food or food intolerances, or if it's just the way that he was sewn back together. But then again, if you really look at the pictures year by year, it's been regressing almost every year for the past 4 years. So
yes.
I think it'd be a punch to work with anyway. I don't think anything that you would say to him he'd take on board. Him thinking that
it'd probably be another Jimmy Gretsch.
He'd probably listen to his missus more than he'd listen to you. All right, I'm going to throw some random topics to you. 10 topics, not necessarily questions. Just want you to briefly discuss your thoughts on each one. You can talk about one for 1 minute. You can be a one-worded answer. You can talk for a couple of minutes for each. All right, I did the same things with Pekowski the other week, and these were pretty popular. So I'm going to throw the same questions and see how much you differ from Pekowski. Number one, exercises don't determine adaptation. It's the application of the exercise that determines everything.
I would agree with that 100%.
Okay.
Because if you continue to do things, if you're doing a bench press wrong, adding more bench press wrong isn't going to fix the issue.
Yeah.
And I truly believe in that, whether it's a hack squat or a barbell squat, like you have to get the execution right first. And that's what's going to provide the biggest amount of change, not just the movement itself. Because if you're doing the movement wrong and you continue to do it wrong, it's never going to be right.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2 was intermittent fasting. We've talked about that. So I'll change it to a coach prescribing specific food intake in their meal plans in comparison to a coach providing macros to their clients. So basically, these are the macros I want you to meet for the day. Eat what you want.
I would prefer to be as specific as possible with food, because I do think that, again, digestion plays a huge role. Knowing what foods work with an individual and don't work with an individual. The more food you have, the more variety you have, the more chance you have to mess it up.
Yeah.
In terms of digestion, or let's say somebody's having diarrhea, but they're eating 50 foods within a week. You don't know what's causing that, But if you're eating 8 foods within a week, then you have a pretty good percentage point to get that and nail that food and get it out of the way. So that really is my biggest factor is performance, digestion, removing any outliers that might not be sitting right. That's why I would say a specific plan over macros.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Also, the inflammatory responses that people will never take into consideration too, which really annoys me. Number 3, fasted cardio versus low intensity cardio versus high intensity cardio versus no cardio. What's your preference?
Fasted, moderate intensity cardio would be my choice, and then the main reason for that, more so than fasted. I prefer fasted, but moderate intensity cardio on a machine that isn't going to really downregulate your ability to recover. That would be my preferred option. I'm not a fan of high intensity cardio because of the way that I train. If you train your typical 3 sets of 10, you can't find failure if it hits you in the face. I'm all for for high intensity cardio in that type of environment. If I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that somebody isn't willing or able to push themselves, I'm at least going to try to get them to push themselves as hard as they can on a bike, on a spin bike. But otherwise, I just don't see. I can't recover from it. And if I can't, and I expect the same thing out of my athletes, then we're just putting ourselves in a big deficit there.
What do you think the benefits are of fasted cardio? Because a lot of people now are preaching the fact that it's a myth.
For me, I think it's it sets up people's day right.
Yeah.
So I think there's a mental component to it. Where you're going to wake up and you're going to do your cardio and you get to spend that time by yourself and get focused. I think it's like some of it is just the environment that you're setting yourself up in for success, versus there's a consistency of waking up and doing it. versus in other environments, typically we get up. I honestly think for more reasons than not, fasted cardio started because people have jobs. So basically their day revolved around waking up, doing cardio, going to their job, training, and then going home, and then it being 9 o'clock at night. So in that environment, again, I think you're able to be assertive first thing in the morning as long as you prioritize hydration as soon as you wake up. Then you can go about your day. Throughout your day, you're able to recover unless you have a labor job for your training in the evening. And then after your training in the evening, if you don't have a second round of cardio, you can go home. For me, I always prefer, even with a PM session, I would prefer to split up the training and the PM cardio. Because I think people at that point, they're so drained that all they care about is getting it over with and not actually being assertive and doing as best as they can, with that session.
Yeah. A lot of people ask the question too, this isn't on the list, but a lot of people ask the question too, if you are going to do cardio straight after your weight training, do you have anything before that cardio in regards to your protein shake or anything like that?
I just have them do like 10 grams of EAAs and then knock it out. Just to kind of more so. And for me, essential amino acids are just insurance. That's how I look at it. Just a little extra insurance, just to get you through that session until you can get a whole food meal in.
Yeah, good advice. Number 4, 5 top must-have subs or vitamins.
Creatine monohydrate, citrulline.
For your pre-workout?
Whey protein, as long as your body digests it well. I think that's a good one. I would say omegas and curcumin or CoQ10 is the other one.
For heart health.
Yep.
Number 5, carbs make you fat.
False.
Number 6.
I prefer to keep as carbs as high as possible within the goal from a performance standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. I've gone back and forth. I used to be a big believer that not carbs make you fat, but carbs make me personally fat. And now I'm eating 4 carb meals a day and haven't felt better and look half decent shape for an off season. So yeah, definitely something that a lot of CrossFitters do the whole keto thing, especially for their
I think
for their type of training is crazy.
I've got a CrossFit promo coming up.
Mate, it is crazy. Go and ask how many of them are doing paleo and keto, and the type of activity they're doing. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Number 6, pre-contest water load and depletes.
I'm not a proponent of water loading. No, I like to keep a high baseline. Basically, I make sure that water's consistent at least from 4 weeks out on in, 6 to 8 liters a day, and I keep that all the way through the day before the show.
Oh, really? And then you deplete just on the day?
Yeah, or basically like 16 hours out, something like that.
Is that the use with the use of diuretics at the same time? Because we here in Australia have moderetics, which are potassium sparring. I think it's something a little bit different. I remember giving one to fucking hell, I can't remember his name now. One of the pros, he won the Arnold Classic not long ago, since retired. Someone put a comparison pick up with his Sean Roden the other day. Do you know what I'm talking about, Gally?
No.
Oh, I can't remember his name. It's fucking just, my mind's gone blank.
He won the Aussie Arnold.
Yeah. Anyway, I gave him one and he said it was the best. It was the best diuretic he'd ever used. But so with that, like diuretics are heavily used here in Australia, and a lot of people depend on diuretics, thinking that it's going to bring them into condition last minute when it's actually fat that they're holding. What's your thoughts on diuretics and how they should be used?
I like to kind of microdose my diuretics. And by that, I mean, I just like to, first and foremost, I like to put a little bit of diuretic in while the water is consistent. So I want to see how much water is being pulled while water is still going in. And then that gives me a better idea of when to cut the water and then how much diuretic use to do once the water's out. Typically speaking, I use more diuretic with more water and then less diuretic when the water's out. Simply because you don't need as much, because if it's pulling hard while the water's in, then it's going to pull even harder once the water's out. I've used Moduretics before. I do like it. I would say a Moduretics, Diazide is two drugs. It's trimethazine, and then it's also hydrochloric thiazide. So if you use a 50-25 Diazide versus I believe it's a 55 Moduretics, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. In my opinion, they're pretty comparable in terms of look.
Yeah. Even with potassium sparing. So the Diazide's potassium sparing also, isn't it?
Yes, correct. Yep. But as best as I can, I like to use quarters and eighths. Is what I like to do with that.
I remember it was Tony. It was Tony,
but less per. So it's a more controlled pull.
It was Tony Freeman I was talking about. I can't believe I forgot his name. Carb loading for a show. Are you a believer in carb loading for a show?
Yes, for sure.
Are they
moderate though, not crazy?
How long do you normally carb load for? Because there's a lot of different practices. Again, here I know of. I've done it so many different ways. I remember working with a coach who carb loaded me for the first 3 days of my deplete. Well, I wouldn't really call it deplete because it was a carb load. So I think it was 4 days out, carb loaded me and then depleted me the day before a show. There's times where I've carb loaded 3 days up to a show. There's days where I've carb loaded 1 day before a show.
I don't like the method of front loading. Which would be that method that you said where basically you depleted the day before the show.
Isn't that an old Dorian Yates method, I think?
Possibly.
I can't remember.
Yeah. I prefer to just kind of consistently go into the show adding food. But again, it's so dependent on the athlete. You know, like I learned with Nathan this year, like Nathan realistically needs a good 36 hours of carb load, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Ian, on the other hand, eats more food throughout the whole diet, and then he needs, a good 3 to 4 days. So it just really depends on the athlete. But again, it's like I don't like to overly suck them down either. So I'm not trying to create these two drastic extremes of these depletion workouts, doing 25 to 50 rep sets, and then trying to overthrow the carbs in and hope you turn into Superman. I'd rather just be more consistent with the training leading up to the show, not overly deplete, understanding that they're already in a depleted state, and then put the food in just to make the muscle fill out, versus just two drastic extremes of dragging them down hard and then filling them up as much as possible, as quick as possible.
Yeah. Next one. Number 8. Cheat meals versus calculated refeed days. Do you adopt either or none?
I prefer calculated refeeds simply because I'm not just going to cheat meal somebody into a show. So the calculated refeeds give me a scope of that point in time, where they're at, how much food they can handle, how that food responds. Again, digestion's a huge factor here. And if I am, say, with the bigger guys, if I want to have that card in my back pocket of using a cheat meal, I will use the same meal that I've given them throughout the week. So, for example, we'll use Ian again. Ian, during his refeeds, he was having, let's say, 5 rice meals a day, and then he would have a burger and fry for his last meal during his high day for the day, because I know the type of food that he needs. So, it gets to a point where you can only give him so much rice and olive oil and, almond butter. He needs something a little bit more denser in terms of the fat content, sodium content of the burger. So I kept that in during his prep. If I have not given that person a cheat meal the whole prep, there's a very, I would say pretty positively, I'm not going to give them a cheat meal right before the show, simply because I don't know how their body's going to respond to that.
Yeah, good answer. Number 9, GH, the Holy Grail or a waste of money?
I think it makes everybody better. So especially from a recovery aspect, I've seen growth happen from it. I don't think it's a waste of money. Absolutely not. If you're trying to be the best bodybuilder you can be.
Yeah. What about as an amateur moving up in the ranks? Do you think it's something that they should be thinking about as a last resort, or there's many other things that they should be focusing on before they even fathom taking or investing?
I think you're going to get your most growth consistently from anabolics. I think that GH, I've seen it with my own eyes. It can change a mediocre bodybuilder into a very, very good bodybuilder. So I try to have these conversations with the younger guys about where do you truly see yourself in 5 years? Do you see yourself working a day job? Do you see yourself having a family? Do you see yourself not even being in the gym anymore? And trying to really get those decisions out of them as mature as they can be. And then, then maybe possibly bring up GH or something like that, because I don't think GH is something that you should take if you don't plan on being a bodybuilder for more than the next 5 years. Yeah. I think it's a commitment. It's obviously an investment or waste of money, depending on how you want to look at it. But that's my overall thing. I've seen people transform on GH. I've seen people make steady improvements. I've never not seen real GH not make a positive change in a bodybuilder.
Yep. Number 10, how long on versus how long off?
I like to dictate this by blood work. So I'm not one of these guys that says 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off, 10 weeks on, 10 weeks off. I like to at least have 8 weeks off at all times. And then we'll review lab work. We'll review what their goals are. We'll review what their show schedule looks like. There's a lot that goes into it. In an ideal world, give everybody 12 weeks on, 12 weeks off. But if you're competing, especially like for pros, if you got to qualify, you got to do what you got to do, to get to the Olympia. There's only so many shows. There's only so many opportunities. You got some people like for example, I'll be straight up. I'm trying to avoid Ramy as best as I can all year because I know he's going to get one of the spots. So that's one show that's already taken. Whoever doesn't win the Arnold, that's another show that's already taken. Whoever gets second at the Arnold, most likely second or third, they're going to win another show. So there's another show that's gone. So it's like you got to play chess, and you got to time these things based off of let's make sure your blood work's as good as it can be, but we also got to get to the Olympia. And that's just the God honest truth. I would love to say, I take 12 weeks off with everybody, but that's not the case. If their blood work's good and we got to get qualified, then we get qualified.
Yeah.
Matt, when you say off, and let's say more the amateur level then, because I understand what the pros have to do. So at the amateur level, off is off, because we've got Gretch over here. I know it's way worse here. We're talking young kids. There's no such thing as off.
Yeah, blast or cruise. I'll call it their HRT or their hormone replacement.
We're talking kids that are 21, 22, just really no idea. And that to them is just how it is these days. You need to stay on something all the time.
Yeah. I give my 2 cents, and again, because it's a service-based industry, I give them option A or I give them option B. What I will say that I'm very firm on is I don't believe in cookie cutter PCTs. So you're not going to come off and you're not going to take Nolvadex for 6 weeks and Clomid for 6 weeks and 4 weeks of HCG and then boom, we'll go back on. If we go that route, we're gonna finish what we started. So we're going to continue to check blood work. We're going to continue to check your LH and your FSH, and we want to make sure those things are refiring, because if you go on a PCT and take PCT drugs and you never reestablish your own ability to produce testosterone, you've completely avoided the point and taken more drugs and spent more money. I do not agree with that. That's big here in the U.S. is like these 6-week PCT protocols, but yet they never go back and recheck the blood work. If your LH and your FSH isn't there, then you still need to be on a PCT. So that's something that I really try to make known to these guys. Now, I will, I personally, I was a natural bodybuilder, and I've been on hormone replacement since I was 23. After 8 months of continued testing, and I got my pituitary gland, I had an MRI on that. My testosterone was at 135. And that was from competing naturally. So I understand that the HRT route, and if that is what they choose, I bring them down to true HRT levels. Like, I'm not doing a 500 milligram a test. That's not their HRT. Just because you take one compound doesn't mean you're on HRT. Like, you need to be within blood range levels to be considered an HRT dose, in my opinion.
Yeah, and a minimum range for that would normally be 250 meg every fortnight.
Maybe 100. Yeah. 165.
Yeah, that's. Oh, sorry, I said minimum. I should have said maximum. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Do we have any more of the listener questions, or have we gone through them, Gally?
We've got a few. Hang on.
There was another question, but I think we answered it in that question. But
actually, most.
Yeah. we'll wrap it up. That was good.
We did well.
When are your plans on actually coming to Australia?
Well, I would love to come. I mean, I want to. It's kind of weird for me this year. I'm going to go. I want to go support Josh at the Arnold. This is my first year not having anybody in the Arnold since 2014. But my goal, I would like to have somebody in the Arnold next year, and for us to go over there afterwards and do that together. So hopefully by next year.
Yeah, beautiful. No worries. You've never been, I'm guessing?
No, I've never been.
Yeah. No, it's a nice place. Don't go to the Gold Coast though. It's pretty rubbish over there. All right, look, Matt, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to say, no, it's nice where I'm from. Don't start.
Google Penrith, and it's a suburb of Sydney, Matt. It's like the worst suburb. It's right out the back on the edge of the city. It's terrible.
You're about to move. You're about to move to Texas, mate. So relax. All right, look, Matt. I want to say thank you for coming on the show. You've been a great support, obviously. Is there anyone that you want to give a shout out to, or anyone that you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
No, I mean, honestly, I just want to thank you guys. I appreciate this. I love talking bodybuilding, and I think that if we continue to give back in this way, I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's good for the sport. So I appreciate you guys. For those of you that listen, if you want to get in contact with me, you can. My Instagram is mattjansen8. My email is matt@camp-jansen.com. And I'd be happy to speak further on anything we talked about here or otherwise you guys have questions about.
Excellent. I'm going to actually pick your brain a little bit when we get off air because I'm planning on maybe doing the Amateur Olympia, and it'll be great.
Yeah,
it'll be great to work with someone different for a change.
Yeah,
maybe you've committed to it.
No, I have, but there are other things happening in my life that you know of that could interrupt. But I'll have to set the plan, and I have to set a goal. But anyway. Look, Matt, thanks again for coming on. For everyone listening on the podcast or watching on YouTube, thank you very much. Make sure if you are watching on YouTube, you click down probably that way or that way and click on the subscribe button. So make sure you subscribe, like the episode and share it amongst all of your friends. We want to make sure that we give the sport as much publicity as we possibly can in this country and all around the world. So once again, thank you, Matt. Thanks, Gally, for coming on, and we'll catch us all next week. See you later.
Appreciate it, guys.